RetroDaze.
Before Netflix, before digital streaming services and direct-to-digital movie premieres, before the glut of content clogging our computers, cell phones, and television, there were video rental stores. These havens of recently released movies were essentially the only place you were able to get movies once they left the theaters, unless you wanted to wait for the cut-up and censored TV version. And renting movies from a video store was glorious.
Oh, I know. You're thinking this is one of those rose-colored glasses moments where nostalgia overtakes reason. Because how could driving all the way to a store where you could only rent movies from their limited stock, which you then had to return 2 days later, be better than unlimited digital access? Well, that's exactly what I'm here to explain. So watch on and rediscover the magic that was the video rental store. Video rental stores first started appearing in the US sometime in the late 70s. The first of these, if we don't count the 1975 store that opened in Germany to rent out reel-to-reel films, was Video Station, opened in 1977 by George Atkinson. Of course, as is usually the case with the question of who was first, there's some speculation that Arthur Morowitz, who began renting videos from a storefront in New York's Times Square that same year, was first. We'll let you fight it out in the comments. 1977 was also the year that RCA unleashed the new VHS format based on JVC's technology as a direct competitor to Sony's Betamax. Partly due to high costs for purchasing tapes and players, and partly due to the confusion and extra expense of having competing formats, video store growth was slow through the latter part of the decade. In addition, not all movie studios had entered the market at this point, meaning there were very few movies available to rent, which were mainly the 50 movies 20th Century Fox licensed to Andre Blais, founder of Magnetic Video. In these early days of the technology, consumers would have to fork over $1,400. That's $7,255 in 2024 when adjusted for inflation for a tabletop Betamax deck, the SL7200. The first VCR, Select-O-Vision, VBT200, was a little more affordable at $1,000, but still a considerable cost for casual movie viewers. In addition, through the early 80s, there were a number of legal issues regarding the legality of video store owners renting videos. Consequently, in 1983, VCRs were in fewer than 10% of US households. Even so, adoption rates of the new tech were rising, and that meant there was a market for video rental services. In 1985, 11 million VCRs were sold in the US, bringing the percentage of US households with a VCR to 30%. It's also calculated that $2.55 billion was spent on video rentals and $773 million on video sales. By the following year, combined video rental and purchase sales would out-earn the box office, and numbers would only continue to rise. This was the golden age of video rental stores.
Hey, I got a science fiction home video I can beam aboard my ship. You do? Ah, good. I'll take 4.
Are you looking for a video store that goes beyond the ordinary?
Oh, samurai video. Oh.
A store with a vast assortment of video subjects.
I want a really smashing rock video.
If you're looking for a store where every video on display is always ready to rent, then come to Paradise and let your video dreams come true.
It's Friday afternoon in the late 80s. Your best friend is coming over soon for a sleepover, your mom is making her legendary lasagna, and your dad just handed you a whole $5 to spend at the video store. That was enough for one new movie, one of the older $1 rentals, and a couple of boxes of candy, if you dig a couple quarters out of your piggy bank for tax. You wait for your friend to arrive before hitting the video store because you understand that renting a movie isn't a chore, it's part of the evening's fun. Heck, most days you even ride your bike to the shop just to browse around, stare at all the wonderful cover art, and maybe buy a slush puppy. Once you arrive with your friend on that fateful Friday, you're greeted by the smell of fresh popcorn. One of the shop's incentives is a free small bag of popcorn for members with every rental, and you thought that made it leagues better than the Blockbuster that had opened up just outside of town. Not only that, but your local mom and pop rental shop has that alluring little section in the back, behind the black curtain. You know the one. Of course, you aren't allowed in that section, but it never stops you from hovering around to see if you can catch a glimpse of the VHS covers when someone walks in or out. Your friend says, "Come on," and pulls at your arm to get you moving. They're right, of course. There's so much to browse, you'd better get at it. In the science fiction section, the first movie to catch your eye is a new release called Inner Space. You immediately recognize Joe Dante's name from Gremlins and another sci-fi gem, Explorers.
Lieutenant Pendleton is about to be miniaturized, placed into this needle, and then injected into this rabbit.
Rock and roll.
But something went wrong, and Tuck's about to get a new destination. Inside Jack Putter.
I'm not a man.
Hello, can you hear me?
I'm possessed!
Now, Jack's got twice the problems,
How you doing, Jack?
but he's double the man. With Tuck on his side,
Kicking more accounts.
in his gut, and on his case.
You're not gonna back groceries all your life, are you, Jack?
And only 24 hours left for Jack to get out of danger, so that Tuck can get out of Jack. Dennis Quaid, Martin Short. Give yourself a shot of adventure.
You're about to suggest this one when your friend holds up the box for RoboCop. Oh man, have you heard some gnarly things about this movie? Your parents hadn't let you go see it in the theater. It was rated R after all, but you knew from experience that this rental shop didn't discriminate when it came to allowing kids to rent R-rated stuff. Another mark against Blockbuster, if we're keeping score. They are both new rentals, each $2.99, but your friend offers to make up the difference. That means no candy, but there is plenty of junk food back at home. Digging in your pocket, you retrieve the membership card. This one has your name on it. Not your mom's name, not your dad's, but your name. It made you feel kind of adult in a way that your library card or school ID just couldn't achieve. This was closer to a credit card because at this location, you paid a small subscription fee to get discounted rentals, one free rental after every 10, and that coveted bag of popcorn. You ogle the box art a little longer before pushing them across the counter and paying. This is going to be a good night. But this wasn't the only type of experience you might have had at the video store. Just as often, those small, privately owned stores had an arcade cabinet or two. It wasn't a full, dedicated arcade, but who could say no to a round of Street Fighter II followed by a brief perusal of the new horror releases? I don't know about you, but I can still see some of those covers. They were epic and became burned into my young brain as prime examples of true art, akin to the comics I hoarded in huge piles around my room. Primarily, the horror tapes were as fascinating as they were repellent. One tape our writer remembers staring at on every possible occasion was Creepers, specifically the media version with Jennifer Connelly's visage half eaten away by a swarm of bugs. It would be many years before he actually saw the movie, also known as Phenomena, but the image was one he never forgot. I'm sure almost everyone watching has a tape or two like Creepers, one you sought out on every visit to the video store just to get a glimpse of the art, as if the store were actually an underground art gallery. There was Monkey Shines with its creepy razor-wielding doll, and Hellraiser with a beckoning pinhead. There was Evil Dead, Faces of Death, Sleepaway Camp, and Ghoulies. They each had a special place in your nightmares, and yet they called you back over and over until finally you rented one to discover the hidden horrors within. Or, you rented The Princess Bride for the umpteenth time and ignored all that silly horror stuff because it just wasn't your thing. In the late 80s and into the 90s, there was yet another fantastic development which ensured we'd only increase the number of video store visits and amount of money spent. Video game rentals. Yes, that particularly addictive electronic wonder, the Nintendo Entertainment System, was in many of our homes right next to the VCR at that point. But again, unlike the now easily obtained library of streaming games made possible by pervasive digital subscription services, as a kid in the 80s and 90s, we were lucky if we had a small collection of a dozen games which we'd play over and over again for months and years. The thing is, games were expensive. Unless you were getting some older release on deep discount, those beautiful gray squares of delight were usually around $25 to $50, which is $63 to $126 when adjusted for inflation. That means the cheapest generic games in the 80s cost nearly as much as the AAA titles do today, and the AAA titles from the 80s cost more than any new games do today, not counting deluxe collector's editions. That is all to say, unless you were from a well-off family, you probably only got a new game or two on birthdays and the winter holidays, which further meant that getting to play the new game for a few bucks was a heck of a deal and something most kids certainly took advantage of. Some stores even had deals like $1-a-day rentals or $5 for a week, giving you the option of a cheap $1 test day to see if the higher cost rental was worth it. Returning to our little nostalgia trip from the beginning of this episode, maybe you and your friend opted for only one movie and a video game rental instead. It'd have to be a two-player game, and preferably not an RPG that you wouldn't have time to beat. You likely already had a few top-tier multiplayer games at home, like Excitebike, Rampage, and Blades of Steel. Perhaps Double Dragon 2: The Revenge, or River City Ransom. Before we go, there's something I have to address. Yes, we threw a lot of jabs at Blockbuster and their ilk today. The corporate video store empires, while undoubtedly part of our collective nostalgic memories, were also the demise of the smaller mom-and-pop shops that many of us loved and grew up with. Blockbuster, and to a lesser extent Hollywood Video, Movie Gallery, and Family Video, had a polished corporate sheen that simply did not exist in the small shops. Walking into a mom-and-pop video store was more like entering a used bookstore or even a bodega. There was something a little mysterious, maybe even dangerous about it. They had those adult sections, front-facing horror movies, and often tapes the chains didn't even bother carrying. These stores were unique. By contrast, every Blockbuster you ever entered was probably just about the same. It was the Walmart of video stores, and while there's nothing necessarily wrong with that, heck, our staff writer still has his membership cards to both Blockbuster and Hollywood Video, right along with the old mom-and-pop shop from his neighborhood, it just wasn't quite the same. Listen, I'm no Luddite. I love technology and use streaming services like most other people do these days, because it's convenient. But that's really the best thing I can say about it. All that streamlined convenience is nice, but it also saps away a lot of what made watching movies special in the first place. It used to be an event, something that everyone prepared for in their own way, usually paired with specific snacks and always with an air of reverence. These days, well, you can watch whatever you want, whenever you want, and you probably do.
While that initially sounds amazing, what you'll notice over time is that you'll check your phone during the movie, and you'll walk away from the screen mid-scene, and you'll leave stuff playing in the background, and you won't care. You'll stop having movie nights because every night is a movie night. And when every night is a movie night, well, how can that still feel extraordinary? Of course, this isn't universal. I know many of you still do make movie night special. Do you need the video store to accomplish this feat? Certainly not. Sure didn't hurt. So tell me, do you miss the video rental store? What are some of your fondest memories of renting videos? Well, I'd love to hear about it down in the comments. And if you enjoy our content, please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, or maybe even activating that ubiquitous notification bell. It really does make a huge difference. Let's meet again next week to celebrate Yesteryear, right here on RetroDaze.
Clicky clacky.